Good morning, YouTube friends. It's Dale from Whatever the Weather May Be. Before I start about this beautiful young lady here, I'm going to tell you about our weather. We've had in the last few weeks very, very cold weather, -40 wind chills, -30 temperatures. But yesterday the wind shifted from the north to the south, and we got up to -5 Celsius, which is really nice. And overnight it went up to +1, which is above freezing. So for the 21st of January, we are having very lovely weather. But I don't want to talk about the weather today. I want to talk about this beautiful doll. This is Elizabeth Owens, and this is my grandmother's doll. Elizabeth is about 120 years old. She is made of, well, originally she was a china head and china hands, but the head and the hands have been replaced on her. However, her body is kid leather, and she is stuffed with sawdust, and that part of her is all original. And this doll was my grandmother's. My grandmother was born in 1896, so I'm estimating that this doll was probably made around 1900s, which makes her about 120 years old now. So my grandmother had this doll for all of her life. My grandmother was born and lived her young life in Palo, Iowa, United States. And she met my grandfather, and they were married in 1917, and then they moved up to Canada, and Elizabeth came along, and she stood on my grandmother's dresser for most of her life with my grandmother. And my grandmother had 11 children in 17 years that she was with my grandfather. And after the birth of her 11th child, she contracted pneumonia and she passed away. And so my eldest aunt, my Aunt Margaret, she was around 11 or 12 or 13 at the time. She took over the raising of the family and sort of replaced her mother to the family. She was the caregiver for all the children, and I think she probably took over the care of this one as well. So my aunt then, somehow the doll got broken, the head and the hands got broken, and so my aunt, she took the doll with her when she became an adult and she moved away from the home and had her own family. She took the doll along because it was always a special thing to her as well. So she took Elizabeth, and then my aunt moved from Canada down to the United States to Wisconsin in the late 50s, and the doll went to Wisconsin with her. And my aunt, over the years, became quite the doll collector. She had a massive doll collection, but this doll was the most precious to her. So in the 70s, my aunt took up working with porcelain and ceramics, and she made this new head and the new hands for Elizabeth. She worked on the body, fixed it up, and she made the new clothes. She made the dress and the pinafore and the little pantaloons, and she bought some new shoes for Elizabeth. And from that time on, Elizabeth stood on her dresser on this little stand here until 2015. My aunt was in her high 90s and she wasn't doing very well, so her family decided that she needed to be put in a care facility. So they moved her out of her house, and Elizabeth stayed in the house on the dresser. My aunt passed away in 2017, and so I got a call from my cousin, my aunt's son, asking me if I wanted anything from my aunt. And I had made her stuff over the years. So I just requested that anything, I had a few things that I had made for her that I kind of would like back. So, and I asked him about this doll, and he, of course, did not know anything about her. I mean, my aunt had so many dolls that, and she had quite a few China head dolls. So for me just to say she was a China head, it didn't mean anything to him. So I made him lift all their dresses to find the one with the kid body. And I described her clothes because I had seen Elizabeth over the years and I knew what she was dressed in. So he found it, and I was quite surprised because I don't think that was an easy task for somebody who wasn't quite sure what they were looking for to find. So he sent her to me, and I've had her now for about 3 years, I guess. So I'll just show you her kid body because you don't see this very often anymore on dolls. Well, you don't see it at all on new dolls, but it's hard to find. So I'll just, sorry Elizabeth, showing your bottom here. So she's made of very soft kid leather, and she's fully jointed, which I'll show you how they used to do it. So if you can see, this bends and allows her to sit. So it's a separate little piece of leather here that allows that to happen. And the same is, well, I can't take this off, but her knees are the same way. There's a separate little piece of leather. Let's see if I can get this down here. Yeah, you can sort of see. There's another little piece of leather at her knees, so it allows the knee to bend. And the same with her elbows. So she's fully jointed, and her leather is in very good shape for her being that old. Her leather's in very good shape. So my aunt has put the stockings on her. I'm sure she made these stockings because and they look like they're out of a pantyhose or knee-high pantyhose. And she made her little pantaloons and her rest of her outfit. So I decided, as much as I love her and would love to keep her because I too collect dolls, I decided that I think instead of keeping her for years and years and years and risking the same thing happening to her if something should happen to me, that I would rather now, I've enjoyed her for 3 years, that I would rather pass her along to a new generation. And so I've been thinking about it, and I discussed it with some of my cousins, and I did find a little girl who I think she will treasure her and keep her and pass her on down through the generations. So my cousin's granddaughter, who lives in France, is going to be the next owner of Elizabeth. So I made a little, and she's going to leave here on Sunday. So I've been kind of working with her, getting her all pressed up and everything. And I made a little book to go along with her. And this little book just has her story in it. And I'll read it to you. My name is Elizabeth Owens. I was made around the year 1900 in the USA. I was bought for a little girl by the name of Mabel Owens, and she is the one who gave me my name. Mabel lived in Palo, Iowa. I was so loved by Mabel. When she grew up and moved to Canada, I went with her to live on a farm in Plumas, Manitoba in 1917. I always sat on Mabel's dresser, but one day one of her children took me off the dresser and dropped me, breaking my china head and hands. Mabel taped me up as best as she could, but I didn't look very nice anymore. In 1934, Mabel passed away, and I lay forgotten on the dresser for many, many years. Then one day, Mabel's grown daughter Margaret came to visit. She had always loved me when she was a child, so she wrapped me carefully in a towel and took me home to Neepawa, where she lived. Margaret put me in a box, and when she moved to Wisconsin in the late 1950s, she took me with her. I lived with Margaret a very long time, and one day she took me out of my box and told me that she was going to make me a new head and hands and some new clothes. She took me apart, being very careful of my delicate kid body. 1970, she made me a pretty new head, just like the one that had broken, and brand new hands. She made me a new dress, a pinafore, and bought me new shoes, and this time she put me on a stand so I wouldn't fall and break, and then she put me on her dresser. I stood on her dresser for many years and watched as Margaret grew older. In 1971, one day a young woman came to visit. Her name was Dale, and she was Mabel's granddaughter. Margaret brought Dale into her room to meet me, and Dale loved me right from the start. And that I did. Ugh, pages are stuck. Margaret told Dale that someday I would go and live with her, but that time was still a long way off. The day came when Margaret was too old to stay in her house. Margaret left in 2015, but I stayed behind on her dresser. I never saw Margaret again. 2017. One day Margaret's son came and wrapped me up and put me in a box. I thought I would be in that box for a long time, but the next thing I knew, I was out of the box and in Dale's arms. I had moved again, back to Manitoba, where I had lived with Mabel and Margaret for a time. Dale washed my clothes, prettied me up, and set me on her dresser. I was very happy to once again be standing on a dresser where I could be seen and visited. Dale loved me, but she thought perhaps it was time for me to meet a younger member of Mabel's family, a child whom I could watch grow up just like I had with Mabel. 2020. Once again I am wrapped safely in a box, and I am told that I will be traveling to France to meet my new owner, Mabel's great-great-granddaughter. I can't wait. I am 120 years old now, but still looking forward to a new adventure. And then I've left a lot of empty pages here, so as she travels through the generations, I hope they note her progress. I just thought it would be just kind of a nice thing to have something written down about her so that they know where she came from, how old she is, and what her history was. As a doll collector, I appreciate that kind of thing because sometimes, you get an old doll, either you buy it or it's given to you, and you just wish that you had the history of where it came from, who had it. And so with that little book, that history goes with Elizabeth. So that's all about Elizabeth. I'm happy to see her moving along to new owner who will look after her and ensure that she's looked after and preserved. And yeah, that's what I wanted to show you today. So from myself and Elizabeth, have a good day, everybody. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye for now.